Well, thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation and for the interest in the Spanish model, which by no means is the model, and by no means I'm trying to give you a master class on how to do anything, but probably you can get some insights or some ideas from our experience and from our mistakes as well. So, well, I'm actually providing you with insight with not one but two PPPs in motions, which is the Spanish Extraordinary Risk Insurance Scheme, which is managed by the CCS, or the consortio. CCS is easier. And also a bit of the Spanish Multi-Peril Agricultural Insurance Scheme, which is also another model of private-public partnership. Well, starting by the CCS and the Extraordinary Risk Scheme, we do have a scheme in Spain which is quite peculiar. We are like the weirdos in the insurance world in Spain, because the size of Spanish economy is comparable to that of Canada, Australia, or Korea. So it's not that anecdotic in terms of impact. But we do have a system which relies on legal features. That is that the key element is that it is, as it has been said this morning, you are not obliged to insure your house if you are insuring your house or your factory or your shop. But if you do so, you are obliged to extend the coverage to the so-called extraordinary risks. And we are not a pool. We are a public enterprise, a state-owned enterprise, a single enterprise, who is pooling risks, actually. So it's not a pool of enterprises covering one risk. It's a single enterprise pooling several different risks in trying to make a compensation between these different risks that we will see later very soon. And as it has been said, the consortio is a public business institution which is attached to the Ministry of Economy, Industry and Competitiveness. And the minimum common denominator that can be said about the CCS is that we are a toolbox at the service of the insurance sector. We are dealing with the insurance of extraordinary risks, but we are also taking up the winding up activity in the event of bankruptcy of an insurance company. We are also the warranty fund for automobile insurance. We have roles in the environmental risks, in nuclear risks, in agricultural insurance, and many others, such as export credit, for instance. So there is this big enterprise, a single enterprise, which is dealing with many different functions. And every time there is something wrong with the Spanish insurance sector, they all look at us, and we try to do it. So our role is complementary of the market and of the insurance sector in Spain. One of the issues by which it is very difficult to replicate the CCS anywhere in the world is that we have our roots in the aftermath of the Spanish Civil War. So it's a very peculiar and sad time in history in which virtually we had no insurance market in Spain. So the government stepped in to provide a way of compensation of the war losses, and it was meant to be a provisionary tool. But after a series of natural and man-made disasters during the 40s and the early 50s, it was seen that it was an interesting tool to complement the insurance market. So finally, we were created by law in 1954. We have a board of directors with 14 members. 7 are from private insurance companies that are normally, they rotate, and 7 are senior officers from the government. The chairperson is the head of the regulator, and there is also an in-house general manager. We have a territorial presence of 18 regional offices throughout Spain and 6 different directorates. And as for March 2017, we are 325 people working at the CCS. The main principles are universality. It is the coverage, if taken, it's compulsory. Therefore, we are avoiding adverse selection. There is compensation. We apply a flat rate, and there is a geographical compensation between all parts of Spain among different risks and in time, because we are building up an equalization reserve. And the cooperation with the private sector is the key, as you will see later, and also the affordability of our rates. What are these extraordinary risks we are talking about? Flood, both riverine or flash flood, coastal flows as well, strong winds exceeding 120 kilometers per hour, and therefore we apply a parametric way of calculating this with the arbitrage of the weather service. We also cover any kind of earthquake and tsunami, volcanic eruption, and some more exotic ones, such as fall of meteorites and sidereal bodies. And we are also covering man-made, such as man-made disasters, such as terrorism, riot, mutiny, and revolt, and the acts of armed force and law enforcement agencies in peacetime. As important as what we cover is what we don't cover. We don't cover the direct effects from precipitation, meaning rain, snow, hail. We are not covering hail. We are not covering landslides or subsidence, and we are not covering winds below this threshold on 120 kilometers per hour, meaning that for those natural risks, it's the market that fully takes part of the risks. So we are also entering in these risks, and these are decided in the common board of administration that we have with the private sector and the public sector. So this has also changed. It has never been like this. We have moved the threshold of wind. Before 1986, we covered hail, for instance, but after the market decided that they could take it, they are taking it. So how does contracting work? Every Spaniard or Spanish resident who is buying an insurance policy for property, personal injury, business interruption, actually is contracting two policies, in most cases without knowing it. Because when they are paying their premium, for these ordinary risks, for instance, a multi-risk property or housing property premium policy, there is a free tariff between insurers, and they can, of course, choose which one to take. But for the extraordinary risks already mentioned, they have to pay a surcharge, which only depends on the amount insured, meaning that there is no difference between the premium they are paying, but on the capital they are insuring, actually. And this surcharge is compulsory. These are our rates. We don't have brokers, because every insurance company operating in Spain are our brokers, actually. Every time they sell a policy, they have to collect the surcharges of the CCS, and on a monthly basis they transfer it to us, retaining a collective commission of 5%. And for that, well, for instance, residential is 0.08 per mil, meaning that if you are insuring your house by, say, 2,100 euros, you are paying 16 euros to the CCS, which more or less is between 3 and 5% of your premium, of your whole premium. And, well, for the rest. The only exception of this tariff applied on the amount insured is for motor vehicle, which is a flat rate depending on, or a fixed rate depending on the type of vehicle. For motor cars now it is 2.1 euros, because now we are covering all vehicles in Spain. Before 2016 we were only covering those vehicles with casco insurance, but now we are covering even vehicles with the compulsory third-party motor liability insurance, meaning that we have reduced our tariff, but now we are covering all nearly 30 million vehicles in Spain. And what losses do we compensate for? Well, for property, we indemnify direct property damages and some supplementary expensive and business interruption, providing it is contemplated in the original policy. And for accidents and life, well, death, permanent disability, and temporary disability. And for personal injury, we are covering also personal injuries from events occurred abroad Spain. So if you are a Spanish policyholder, or Spanish resident, not necessarily a Spanish national, and you have a life insurance in Spain and you are affected by an earthquake in Nepal, which has been the case, you have a right for compensation from CCS. And the compensation terms are exactly the same ones that in the original policy contracted with your private insurer, for the same amounts, with the same conditions, and we apply some deductibles, but we don't apply deductibles for personal injuries or for those properties considered of personal use, such as your house or your car. We apply these deductibles to the commercial and industrial and infrastructure, etc. And for business interruption, we take the same deductibles already stated in the ordinary policy contracted with your insurance company. We don't have our own loss adjustments. We have a pool of adjusters that work with us for many years, and well, we can deploy them very quickly in the affected areas, but they are not part of our staff. And the coverage features is, well, everything we do is defined by law. That is what your discussions this morning were very interesting. Everything is stated in law, the surcharges, what we cover, what we don't cover, the conditions of the cover, everything is in the Spanish Gazette. And it's a coverage which is qualitative and not quantitative, meaning that if, as a result of an earthquake, there is a glass breaking in your house, we pay the glass. And if, as a result of an earthquake, your house is completely demolished, we pay the house. So there is no upper or lower limit. And there is the coverage is automatic. There is no need of declaration of state of catastrophe or anything. It's automatic, as we say. Well, some data. The Spanish insurance market, such as the Spanish economy, has evolved very much especially after the entrance of Spain in the European Union in 1986. And well, you see that now we are covering nearly 120 million policies, be it from personal injuries, from property, and from business interruption. We are covering business interruption since 2004. And our exposure is about 16 trillion euros of insured capital. Therefore, in the lower right graph, you can see that what's our ratio between surcharges or income and losses. No, surcharges are in green and losses in property in red, meaning that for most years we have a surplus, and this surplus is going to feed a catastrophe fund, actually, which nowadays is a bit more than 8 billion euros. Our combined ratio is about 56%. And for this, we are covering these three insurance lines, but 97% of what we pay is of property damage. And taking into account our risks, 93% of losses are natural, 7% are man-made, of which 6% is terrorism, that we know it has been a problem in Spain for many years. And, 85% are from hydrometeorological origin, of which flood is our star risk, which is 69%. Earthquake is also a very quite important risk, but it's, of course, the frequency of earthquake, happily, is not as frequent as floods that we have every year, or even strong winds. Sometimes we've been criticized for not enhancing risk mitigation by applying a flat rate. Well, the fact is that if we divide the number of losses that we have had adjusted to inflation by the number of claims we have, that logically have risen because the penetration of insurance in Spain have risen as well. Now for housing, the penetration is 76% in Spain. And it's voluntary. So if we divide that, we can see that since the mid-80s, what we pay per claim has divided per 3, meaning that having a flat rate is not a hindrance for risk mitigations, because risk mitigation is the responsibility of many, not only from the insurance, of many of the policyholders, of course, but also from the weather service, the hydrological service, the civil protection authorities, the norms that you have for building, etc. And to finish with this part, we are an active partner in risk reduction and risk awareness by initiatives from OECD, from the European Commission. We participate together with PIDE in the World Forum of Catastrophe Programs. And for us, it's quite easy being a public institution, not a governmental institution, but a state-owned institution, to deal with the weather service, with the geological survey, with the academia. So we are a bit in the middle of everywhere, and it is quite easy for us to interact with them in promoting studies on risks and promoting also the risk mitigation and risk awareness. Well, I have already said that, so I will skip to the second part, which is the Spanish multi-peril agricultural insurance scheme. Here, well, Spain, as you know, is a very complicated country in terms of geography and climatology. And there is a Spanish song that says that in Spain, rain doesn't know how to rain. And, well, and it's quite true. And, well, due to these huge variations in precipitation, we have 2,600 millimeters of precipitation here, and less than 200 millimeters precipitation here. And agriculture is not as important as it was before. Now it's less than 4% of Spanish GDP, but it's an important sector. So we had to do anything in terms of irrigation infrastructures, because otherwise we won't have any agricultural sector, and also agricultural insurance. So in the 80s, there was created the current Spanish multi-peril agricultural insurance scheme. It's also voluntary, but if the farmer decides to take insurance, he must underwrite all the different exploitations of the same kind. The cover in this case is provided by a pool, which is managed by a private company, such as PIDE here in Romania. And now there are 23 companies taking part of this pool. This pool administrator is called AgroSeguro. And the whole system is subsidized by the ENESA, which is the National Body for Agricultural Insurance. And some regional governments can choose to subsidize as well the farmers. In the beginning, CCS stepped in because no one wanted to take the risk, and we were taking like 60% of the risks in the pool, but now there is a risk appetite, and we are retaining we can say, logistical and strategical 10% of the risks in the pool, but we could easily get out if we wanted. The risks covered are, well, damages caused by abnormal variations of weather and climate, hail, fire, drought, frost, flood, windstorms, hot winds, snowfall, excess humidity, and other climatic adversities, and also some pests, accidents, and diseases in productions and installations. And normally they are not isolated, they are sold in multi-peril policies. And it is important that what is insurable under the agricultural insurance cannot be compensated otherwise. This year we have a tremendous drought in central and northern Spain, and farmers are asking for help and say, okay, you should have contracted an insurance because we have an instrument in place for that, so now don't cry, in a way. The system is dynamic. In the beginning was only limited to certain crops, mainly cereals, and some risks such as hail and fire, but now practically we are covering every sector, both for agriculture and livestock, and and even aquaculture and forestry. The penetration rates vary, but it's for some of them, for the fruit trees, is about 90%. The banana in the Canary Islands is 100%, but that has a trick because the regional government in the Canary Islands oblige farmers to have insurance. It's the only exception to the voluntary nature of the agricultural insurance. And for others, such as olive, which is quite important in Spanish agriculture, as you know, it's very low. It's about 6%. And for livestock, if the removal and destruction of dead animals is nearly 90%, and for aquaculture is 37%, for cows 22%, and for others lower, much lower. What are the roles of CCS in the agricultural insurance scheme? Well, we are the compulsory reinsurer of the scheme. For that, we also take a surcharge on the premiums. And there is a different equalization reserve for that currently has about €1 billion. And we are integrated in the co-insurance pool, taking 10%, as I already said. And we also assess and supervise loss adjustments. The working mechanism could be more or less like this. This is the pool of agricultural insurance. The insured pay a premium, and of course the pool is paying a compensation whenever there is a loss. They are subsidized by this enterprise belonging to the Ministry of Agriculture and from the regions, but there is a premium that Agroseguro pays to the CCS because there is a reinsurance contract, and we also could be reinsured, not now, but in the beginning of the system we had also reinsurance for that. And for some lines, there can be also private reinsurance for Agroseguro. So that's more or less the mechanism. And in figures, this is the level of reserve. This is the cost of primary insurance. Well, more or less you see that the system, after a very bad beginning, then they started to have a phase of growth. Then we started coinciding with the economic crisis that affected heavily Spain during these past years, a period of stagnation, and now it seems that we are again starting a period of growth. And by the way, 2017 is going to be, as I said, a very bad year for the agricultural insurance. And if we take this, if we compare the compensation we pay to farmers with the state subsidies, by each euro subsidized by the state, farmers receive 2.2, which is quite good. And there are also some here. There is not a flat rate. The rate is it depends on the level of risk, and we apply some bonus malus system for premiums, and also for measures taken by the agriculturers. In summary, there are advantages more or less for everyone, for the state, because it's an ex-ante risk management policy, which allow government for long-term planning and budget stability. The system works as a public-private structure, reducing economic and political costs, avoid duplicities, and direct aids are kept to a minimum because, as I said, only in very, very exceptional cases some aids are granted. For insurers, well, they have access to a new insurance market. They can commercialize other type of product to farmers, and as any other co-insurance pools, where they can share the costs and cover potentially very heavy losses. And the farmers, well, there is a system that they have legal certainty that they are going to receive compensations. Normally, the delay between damage and compensation is about 60 days or less. And if you take risk reduction measures, they are encouraged. And also, obviously, the solvency of the farmers are improved because they have access to the financial system. So thank you very much for your attention.